All right. Hello, everyone. This is going to be The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker HD any percent. I'm going to be gymnast86, your runner today. So with that, we will get started. So my file name of choice is Screeching. So we're going to see lots of screeching in this run. But if we're ready on the timer, we can start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so Wind Waker HD has had a pretty interesting history for a speed game. It initially started out as sort of basically just a glitchless playthrough of what the intended route was, but it's gotten pretty crazy over the years. I'm sure that many of the viewers out there have heard of the infamous barrier skip sequence break, which we'll be seeing in the run today. It's gotten so crazy to the point that the run can actually be completed in under an hour, which, if everything goes like absolutely swell in this run, we might see that today, but there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, so hopefully we will have a good showing. The run is going to start out with me having to pause the game quite a bit to do a trick known as manual super swimming, where I'm going to be turning Link back and forth in the water and pausing every frame so that I can actually do it as a human being. It is possible to do without pausing, but that would require flicking the control stick back and forth 30 times a second, so that's not exactly human feasible to do. It's really entertaining to watch in a task setting, though. And we are playing on the Spanish version of the game. The Italian version is technically the fastest, but this is a North American Wii U that I'm playing on, so it does not have the Italian version natively on it. But Spanish is only about 8 seconds slower than Italian throughout the entirety of the run. So it's not really that big of a deal, especially for a marathon. All right, so the pausing that I mentioned is going to start right away as soon as I jump into the water, pretty much. And it does require a lot of concentration, so I probably won't be speaking very much when it happens. But you guys can enjoy the rhythmic sensation of the pause happening, so enjoy. So every time that I turn around here, I have to turn around frame perfectly if I want to gain speed. I don't want to pause early because then I could potentially lose a lot of speed. But if I pause too late, that means that essentially nothing has happened with the pause, and I haven't gained any speed from it. So I'm essentially just looking to not pause early, so my pauses are being safe by being sort of on the late side of things. Yeah, so that right there is an early pause. It's hard to not have at least like a few of those happen. A little more than halfway there, it looks like. Still need a little bit more speed. Come on. He's almost there. Okay. Okay, and all right. So we've now sort of been able to stabilize ourselves in this state. I'm actually going to go just a little bit far out to make sure that I don't hit the shoreline. Because hitting the shoreline here would be really bad, and I would most likely end up losing all my speed. So we don't want that to happen. But I do want to charge up as much speed as I can here. And then I can get an air refill right here before we finally charge off into the ocean and can make our way all the way over to Dragon Roost Island, which is on the complete opposite side of the ocean. And by doing this, we have successfully skipped the first roughly half hour of the game in just a little over 6 minutes. All right, so we're here at Dragon Roost. So even though we did skip the first half hour of the game, there are still a few things in that section that we'll have to go back and do, but it is significantly faster to come here to Dragon Roost first. Because there are a few things that we receive here. First off, we're going to receive the Wind Waker from the Invisible King of Red Lions. I'll explain why he's invisible later, but it's not really that important. So he's going to teach us these songs and give us the Wind Waker. But the most important item that we need to get here on Dragon Roost is actually the grapple hook up in Dragon Roost Cavern. Because the grapple hook is going to allow us to do a glitch that's known as item sliding, and item sliding is what really allows this game to be broken open very heavily. Alright, got the Wind Waker. So normally when you go up Dragon Roost Island, you need to go blow up some rocks. But we can sort of just jump off of this rock and then jump past this one to skip having to go do all that. And to make our way over to Quill. So a little bit more about the technique that we just did to get across the entire ocean, since we have just a bunch of cutscenes coming up. The technique that I did is formerly known as manual super swimming. And so every time that Link turns around in water, his speed actually decreases by 3 units of speed. And since there's no negative cap on how low your speed can go, you just keep on, like, you know, your speed just keeps on decrementing every time you turn around, and it eventually gets to a point where you can get enough speed to swim across the entire ocean. During the manual super swim, after I've paused for long enough, I can actually do a technique known as an upcharge, where due to the massive amount of speed that Link has, he's actually turning past where the camera is every single time he turns around, and the camera will actually follow him through that motion. So that's why when I get to a certain speed, I can just hold up on the analog stick, and then every time that Link turns around in the water, the camera follows him and flips 180 degrees. And so then I just need to hold up again to continue doing that, instead of having to constantly switch between up and down between every single frame. And if done really well, that trick will allow you to get to Dragon Roost in less than 5 minutes, but usually that doesn't happen in marathon settings, so I'm pretty happy with the super swim that we were able to get. So unfortunately, there's not much we can do to skip this section right here. The entire purpose of this section that we're doing is so that we can get a bottle to get into Dragon Roost Cavern. But to do that, we have to get this delivery bag and then get a letter and show it to Komali, who is the son of the chieftain of the Rito here. So there is an alternate bottle that we technically could get, but it would require us to do a second manual super swim, since the other bottle that we can get right now is in a submarine out in the ocean near where Bomb Isle is, which is not anywhere near Dragon Roost Island or Outset, so it would require us to do an extra manual super swim to get that bottle. So even if we did that really well, it unfortunately wouldn't be any faster than just getting the bottle regularly right here. So for this run, I am playing on the Wii U gamepad, we can see right here. The gamepad is the preferred choice for running this game. since the gamepad allows you to equip items without having to pause the game, and it will allow you to aim around with the gamepad's gyro controls, which makes aiming very nice. Although, I actually turned off the gyro controls when the run began. When I did a side hop off of the tower at the start of the run, I changed my camera controls to match that of the original Wind Waker, since those are the camera controls that I'm used to. And I also then turned off the gyro. There are some tricks in this game that require like very precise aiming, and the gyro can kind of mess that up. So until I'm done with all of those, the gyro is actually going to stay off. But there's only one real section in this run where the gyro is actually like extremely useful, and it's right near the end. So by the time I get there, all of the precise aiming tricks will be over. And so this is Medley. She's going to give us a bottle once we throw her over to the ledge over there. So while we're going through this text, there's actually a wind cycle in this area that's currently active. So I have to make sure that I mash through this text fast enough so that I can actually throw Medley during the proper part of the wind cycle and not be too late for it. So the wind's going to change now, and we can throw her. It's actually funny because on the Italian version, which has faster text, it actually doesn't save any time in this area. So even though the Italian text is faster, you still have to wait until the wind is blowing in the correct direction to throw Medley. So, like, there have been times where, you know, I switch between running in Spanish or Italian for various reasons. And then when I get to this point on the Italian version of the game, I throw Medley really early where the wind cycle is bad, and she just, like, bonks into a wall, and I lose, like, 20 seconds, and I feel like an idiot. But, yeah. Thankfully, you can't really do that on Spanish because the text isn't fast enough to throw her too early. All right, so now we got our bottle with water, and we can use it to water this bomb flower. We need the bomb flower because we need to activate blowing up this rock for the water in the pond to rise up. Interestingly enough, that one rock right there is not possible to blow up with a regular bomb. We're going to be getting the bomb bag and the bombs as an item we can use later in this run. But for whatever reason, bombs just don't work on that rock. So even if we could get the bombs before we go to Dragon Roost, it would not help us in being able to skip the bottle. All right. We did our little basketball with the bomb flowers, and now we can head into Dragon Roost Cavern. So we're coming into Dragon Roost Cavern, obviously, with only, like, the Wind Waker and a bottle, which aren't very useful against many of the enemies that we'll face here. But thankfully, Wind Waker does allow you to pick up enemy weapons and use those weapons against the enemies, which is super useful in this case since we don't have a sword that we can use ourselves. We can also use the many pots that are located around Dragon Roost Cavern to damage enemies, just like this. So we need this guy's torch. So we just throw the pot at him, get his torch, and be on our merry way. Dragon Roost Cavern also has like a ton of small little optimizations that usually get overlooked, but they are very important for being able to do a really fast Dragon Roost Cavern. So again, there's a wooden barrier over here that we can't break because we don't have a sword, but we can just throw a rock at it, and it breaks all the same. So it's actually pretty miraculous that this all works without a sword. Otherwise, we'd have to waste like 5 minutes before doing the manual super swim to go and get one. I'm also going to be getting at least 9 rupees in Dragon Roost Cavern, because there's a mini game that I'm going to play later, which is useful to the any % run, which costs 10 rupees, so I will need those. So if you've played this game casually, you'll remember that at a certain point you do collect the sail, because this is Wind Waker. That's all you do. You sail around and go to different islands and stuff. But this run is actually not going to be getting the sail, so I don't have to worry about like getting 80 rupees to buy the sail or anything. Alright. So in this room, this Bokoblin sometimes likes to be mean. Okay, good. He wasn't mean today. If the Bokoblin decides that he wants to hit you right away, he breaks the pot that you're holding. And if he breaks both of the pots, you actually have to go in and out of the room to respawn the pots, which is a little annoying. So something that I personally find interesting about like the strats that we do now is that, like, even though we don't have the sword for these strategies, most of these strategies are actually faster than, like, using the sword like we would used to before when we came to Dragon Roost Cavern with a sword with us. So it was actually kind of funny to, like, see that Dragon Roost Cavern, for the most part, is actually, like, it doesn't matter if you have a sword or not, but there are, like, some specific instances where the sword does clearly save a lot of time. But it's mainly, like, all of the smaller optimizations that end up being faster to just do swordless. And alright, the Koblin didn't hit us, that's good. We're gonna have to wait for this lava cycle right here. This cycle actually starts when you enter the dungeon, and it is possible to be able to get up the ladder before that lava cycle happens if your movement is, like, perfect throughout the first part of the dungeon. We can also jump over that sidle gap, because it's really small. Right here, I did a frame-perfect roll so that I could jump without getting pushed down off of the wall, because that's faster than, like, you know, climbing over on the ledge, like the game normally wants you to do. That's not the block I wanted to pull. Alright. Small optimization here, being able to roll up onto the block instead of having to wait for Link to manually climb it. I'm not sure why, but from the original game to this game, they changed the way that you interact with the blocks so that in the original game, you had two separate buttons that you would use for climbing or for grabbing the block. But for some reason in this game, they got rid of the button to climb the block, and there's just a button for grabbing. If you want to climb the block, you have to, like, be walking against it for a second or so. Which is kind of strange, but that's what they did, so that's what we have to deal with. Ow. My rupees. So most of Dragon Roost Cavern is just, you know, getting a small key to progress to the next part of the dungeon. So the next small key is being guarded by this Kargarok, who's going to leave it, and then we can get it. And that's the last small key. And then more pot optimizations. Oh wow, I broke both of those. That's never happened before. There's actually an alternative strategy in this room that's kind of funny, where you can light the torches when the torch is still inside the pot, and then, like, side hop around with the pot above you. But unfortunately, it's, like, very slightly slower, even though it looks really funny. Speaking of funny things, though, we're gonna break this chair over this Bokoblin's head, because we need his sword. For the three Bokoblins in this room, the one with the sword that we currently have is the most powerful sword. The others just have sticks. Need to get farther away from the wall. Alright. That was an okay fight. It can definitely go a lot worse than that, so that's fine. But yeah, the strategy there is to, of course, group them all together so that you can try to hit them all simultaneously with that one Bokoblin's weapon. Alright, nice. So if you throw the water pot there late enough, you can have the platform be far enough to the left so that you don't have to go on the small bridge that normally leads over there. And then another small optimization of just rolling through the boulder as it's exploding so we can get to the door quicker. Dragon Roost Cavern is, as I said, pretty much just all about these really small optimizations that we do so that we can get to the grapple hook as fast as possible. Alright, so now we have these two green Bokoblins to fight. Green Bokoblins have more health than the blue Bokoblins that we've seen so far. So we require a few more hits. Hey, nice, we got the double. Alright, so now each of these guys has 3 more health. Ow. Oi. Alright. Medley is a very sad bird right now. But it's okay, we'll free her in just a few seconds after we get rid of this Moblin right here. For the Moblin, it's actually possible to get 2 hits in with the sword if we hit him at a good angle. Okay. He tried to block us each one of those times, but if we're standing at the correct angle and the Moblin doesn't try to block us, then he's going to get hit twice with the sword, which is pretty cool. Alright, but of course, all of that we just did is so that we can get up to this point in the dungeon and get the grappling hook. So Once we get the grappling hook, we're actually done here in Dragon Roost Cavern because we're not going to be beating any of the dungeons in this game. We will be speeding through very fast. Alright, or the Gara, as it's called in Spanish. Alright, so now I'm going to be save warping. Normally, save warping would take me back to the beginning of Dragon Roost Cavern, but due to the fact that I skipped a huge chunk of the early part of this game, I skipped over some triggers that would normally manipulate my saving flags to be what they normally should be. So this is actually going to spawn me directly back at Outset, which is actually very convenient, because it allows us to get here quicker. And now we're introduced to our item sliding glitch that we have with the grapple hook. This is going to allow us to essentially super swim across the ocean without the need to pause every single time, which is very nice. So our first destination that we have is this submarine right here. This submarine is actually going to take us back to one of the previous parts of the game that we didn't go to. So because we don't have a sword, these lantern moblins are programmed to throw us into the Forsaken Fortress jail, even though that's not even remotely where we are. So here we are in jail. But beating Forsaken Fortress 1 is required to be able to progress through the game, otherwise it causes a crash later if we don't try to beat it. So obviously we're going to need to do this. More about the item sliding glitch that we're doing. So when Nintendo remade this game, they gave us the ability to walk around while we're holding first-person items, which was not something we could do in the original game. So with that, they apparently introduced this really strange mechanic where we can gain an infinite amount of speed if we hold certain directions on the control stick while we're walking around in first person with first-person items such as the grappling hook. This also works with the boomerang, the bow, and the hookshot, which each have their own minor differences, but the same overall trick works. Also, I need to hit this Gossip Stone trigger right here, because this is what's going to allow me to get the bombs later, so just keep that in mind. So the way that you actually execute the item sliding glitch is you hold the direction on the control stick, and then you want to pause the game and then hold very slightly out of the dead zone in the opposite direction on the control stick. And this will cause Link to exponentially gain speed in the original direction he was walking. So this isn't a linear speed increase you're seeing, it's an exponential speed increase. The difference between those two being that, for example, manual super swimming is a linear speed increase, but item sliding is an exponential speed increase. With manual super swimming, there's not enough time in the universe to really crash the game with a speed value, but with item sliding, you can crash the game with about 8 seconds of building up speed. So that's the difference there with the differences in speed gain that we're dealing with. Alright, so I grappled that Bokoblin because he had an extra rupee to give me, and because it canceled a cutscene that would have normally happened. So this guy actually doesn't notice me right now. So if I attack him, he's not going to do anything towards me. So, yeah. Normally we defeat him faster, but I thought it would be funny to just show off how the Bokoblin doesn't have any cares in the world right now. And bonk. Okay. All right, so now we've successfully completed Forsaken Fortress 1. What this is going to do is beating Forsaken Fortress 1 will actually spawn in the King of Red Lions into the general, game memory. So, as you may have recalled that when we first did the manual super swim across the ocean, the King of Red Lions was not in the cutscene where we got the Wind Waker, and that's because we hadn't beaten Forsaken Fortress 1 yet. I'm not really sure why the game works this way, but there are certain actors for which, the King of Red Lions being one of them, where if you don't hit a certain point in the game's story or in the game's natural progression, the actor just, won't exist in any of the subsequent cutscenes that they're in after that. And that's actually why the game ends up crashing at a later point in the game, because there's a cutscene where the game expects Link to be in the King of Red Lions, but Link isn't in the King of Red Lions because the game never, loaded the King of Red Lions into memory, so. It would save a lot of time if we didn't have to do this, because obviously this cutscene that we're watching right now is very long. But unfortunately, we'd have to work with the confines that the game gives us, that being one of them. So this is Ganondorf. He doesn't consider us a threat, but if we do everything correctly, we will be beating him in about 40 minutes. So hopefully that will happen. And so this is the point in the story where we would normally meet the King of Red Lions. There he is. And this is also what I was talking about earlier with the save warping flags. This is one of the triggers that like sort of fixes the save warping flags as they're supposed to normally work. So whenever I save warp now, it's going to take me back to Windfall Island. But there's actually going to be another sort of fix that I'm going to do, which will permanently fix my save flags for the rest of the game. And so whenever I do a save warp after that, I will appear where I should normally appear. And so when I do that trick, the trigger for like permanently fixing the save flags is going to be simply riding in the King of Red Lions after this cutscene ends. Because normally the King of Red Lions doesn't allow you to get, he doesn't allow you to sail away if you don't actually buy the sail, but we don't want to buy the sail because buying the sail is kind of slow and requires us to watch some more cutscenes. So instead, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to void out on the edge of the ocean, and that will actually place me in the King of Red Lions, in the quadrant where the King of Red Lions is currently resting. So right now that would be Windfall, but I'm going to change where the King of Red Lions is resting by going to Dragon Roost Island and entering and exiting a loading zone. And the reason for that is because right after I enter into the King of Red Lions, because I don't have a sail, if I wanted to get anywhere reasonably, I would have to cruise with the King of Red Lions to Dragon Roost, which is very slow. But because Dragon Roost Island has a really weird save warping property, I can just exit the King of Red Lions immediately after that happens and do a save warp to go back to Dragon Roost. So we'll see all of that in action right now. So first we're going to start up another item slide. And we will be super swimming over to Dragon Roost. The slope here is a little weird, though. Oop, come on. Okay, so we got to go a little bit slower into the water this time. There we go. All right. So we'll make our way over to Dragon Roost. So the loading zone we're going to be entering and exiting is the beetle ship right here. So kill all my speed using the L targeting, and then just go in and out of beetle. So now the King of Red Lions is resting on Dragon Roost Island. So when I super swim out of the edge of the, or over like the edge of the ocean now, because the ocean does have a limit, it's going to just void me out immediately and spawn me back in the King of Red Lions. So now our save warping flags are fixed. And this is actually a very important thing to do because since I'm not getting the sail, skipping the sail actually sets up a lot of other opportunities for a soft lock in this game. And obviously we don't want to be soft locking anywhere. So being able to not soft lock is nice, and which is why we fixed the save warping flags. Okay, so this is the mini game that I talked about earlier that we're going to be going to play. I can get my super swim to line up. There we go. This is the flight control platform minigame, and this seems like kind of a weird place to go to in the run. But what's special about this is that the flight control platform actually changes the state of the overworld when we play it. And this is useful because one of the changes in state that it makes is it spawns in the pirate ship at both Windfall and Outset Island. So I'm going to be jumping with an item slide from here to Dragon Roost Island and then super swimming to Outset Island so I can get into the pirate ships to go and get the bombs. This does require a very specific speed, though, so hopefully we do this correctly. Okay. Alright, this looks like it was not quite enough speed, but we have the power of Pausa, so it's time to do this again. We won't do it for as long because we don't need to travel very far, but this is still generally what we do in runs if we go either too far or too, or like we don't get enough speed to make it to Dragon Roost Island. So I'm not going to need too much. I probably only need to do this for like maybe 20 more seconds or something instead of the 3 minutes that I did at the start of the run. We're also going to be aided by what's known as ESS swimming, which is going to essentially be a way of conserving our speed as we super swim across to the island here. Okay, So normally we lose about 3 units of speed if we just are super swimming across the ocean without holding any control stick input. But if we hold the ESS position, which is slightly outside of the dead zone that I mentioned earlier, then it actually helps us lose less speed as we go along. So it's very useful in that regard. All right, so to Outset Island now. That's the Fairy Island. That's the Earth Temple. And here's Outset. I have to make sure I don't go in too quickly, otherwise I'm going to sploosh and lose all my speed, which we don't want. But here's the pirate ship. So we can just go here now. The reason this pirate ship is preferred to the one at Windfall is because the one on Windfall is actually password protected. Because normally at that point in the game you would need a password to get into the pirate ship, but the one at Outset doesn't have that, so we can just simply enter into the door. And now we meet Nico. So unfortunately, we can't use the item sliding technique in this room. Otherwise, we would just item slide our way to the bombs chest over on the other side. But the reason we can't do that is because the grapple hook is not a usable item in this area. So if you look on like the X button right now on the GUI of the game, it's actually grayed out, and that means that we can't use it. Could still use the bottle though, but the bottle's not very useful. So we will be jumping across these ropes here. Alright. So it is actually possible to skip collecting the bombs, and the current world record for this game does skip collecting the bombs entirely. But that requires doing a very difficult trick at the end of the run that unfortunately is not marathon safe. So instead I will be getting the bombs. You also get to see some cool tricks when we get bombs, like the flight control platform escape that we just did, as well as a trick coming up in a few minutes known as the Deku Tree cutscene skip. But first, we have to talk to Tetra here, who we haven't seen in this run yet. So when this game was re-released on the Wii U, it actually included a hero mode that you're able to toggle on and off at will, so your file isn't confined to being in either normal mode or hero mode. And this is actually good because for this next section of the run, I'm going to switch the run into hero mode for the trick that I just mentioned, the Deku Tree cutscene skip. Because that trick requires us to die on a specific frame before the Deku Tree cutscene begins. And so with hero mode, we take double damage, meaning that it's going to be significantly faster to die with hero mode. But before we do that, we have to make a quick detour over here to Thorn Fairy Island. And on Thorn Fairy Island, we can get a quiver upgrade from the Great Fairy that's here. All right, nice. So that trick is actually really finicky. I'm surprised I got that first try, but I'll take it. So the reason that we're getting a quiver upgrade, this seems kind of random, but near the end of the run, we're going to be obtaining the light arrows. And the light arrows by themselves do not give Link a quiver. So if we get the light arrows without having first gotten this quiver, we won't be able to shoot any arrows because the maximum arrow count we can have at that point would be 0. The only bow iteration that actually gives you a quiver is the one that you would normally get in Tower of the Gods, but we're not going to get anywhere close to Tower of the Gods in this run, so it would be a huge waste of time to try to go get that bow. So exiting the Fairy Fountain is actually easier. I can just jump slash out of these vines. There's actually an invisible wall behind those vines, so it's not possible to just simply item slide past them to get into the Fairy Fountain. Okay. So now we will be super swimming over to the Forest Haven. The reason we choose Thorn Fairy Island over Western Fairy, which also has a quiver upgrade, is because at Western Fairy you can't super swim off of the island, since there's no way to charge up speed with an item slide against a wall to then dip into the water. All right. So another thing I should mention is that now because we have the bombs, we're actually sort of in the potential soft lock zone with the King of Red Lions that I mentioned earlier. Because we don't have the sail, due to how, like, the text sequences work in this game for the King of Red Lions. If I get too close to the King of Red Lions at any point in this run, the King of Red Lions is going to lock me in an infinite series of text boxes where he continuously asks me if I have the sail or not, because I guess he's really pissed off that we never got the sail. So hopefully we will not be doing that. Alright, so I'm gonna damage myself into the trigger for this small cutscene beforehand. And so the Deku Tree cutscene where you know, Link meets the Deku Tree and gets introduced to the Koroks and all of that, and where the Deku Leaf spawns, that's going to happen once all of the Choo-Choos on the Deku Tree's face are dead. So I need to kill a Choo-Choo and then kill myself on a specific frame to activate the cutscene skip. Okay, this is going to be a little awkward, so I'm going to use this guy. Okay, so I need to hold down, and... Alright, excellent. So now the cutscene is going to try to trigger, but Link is going to die, since death will take priority over the cutscene. And so, because the game triggered the cutscene, though, the cutscene is considered to be played, and we don't have to watch it. Which is nice because it's like, you know, a 2-minute cutscene that we get to skip. We do respawn out here, though, and this is why fixing the save warping flags is useful, because otherwise we'd respawn at Outset Island, and we'd have to super swim over here again. But now when we go back inside the Forest Haven, the Deku Leaf is going to be up on top of the tallest branch on the Deku Tree, and the Koroks will be everywhere and floating around and all that kind of stuff. So even though the Deku Tree cutscene skip itself is actually only 1 frame, there's actually a very clever way that we can give ourselves 3 frames to do it. So the setup that I did specifically was pausing the game to look for one of 3 specific frames of the Chew death animation after I'd already placed down a bomb. And depending on which frame I realized I was able to get, I could change the direction I held while swinging Link's sword, so that Link would do a different type of sword slash, which all have varying speeds. And it just so happens that they all happen to line up on 3 consecutive frames, so that depending on which frame we get, we can just hold a different direction on the control stick and be able to get the cutscene skip. And, alright, good bulb skip. The collision right there is weird, but you can skip the last bulb if you aim yourself correctly. So that's what we did. The collision for the seemingly circular branch up here is actually like a square, because it's just like a regular polygon. So we can just sort of stand on the corner just barely when we stand up out of the bulb. Alright, so now we change back to normal mode because I will need hearts to spawn later in the run. And now we're pretty much done on the overworld here. Next, we're going to be doing a sequence break that will sort of allow us to go to the Hyrule section of this game early. And that sequence break is going to be known as Early Master Sword. So we're going to go over here to Forsaken Fortress 2, which is an island we're not supposed to be able to go to yet. The first iteration of Forsaken Fortress is actually on an entirely separate map. It's not on the overworld. And using item sliding, we're going to scale Forsaken Fortress 2, which normally requires us to have the Skull Hammer, but we unfortunately can't get the Skull Hammer because getting the Skull Hammer requires getting the Master Sword so that you can defeat Phantom Ganon. And for the longest time, that was actually a huge problem for us because there's this trick that we're doing coming up here called Door Clip, because at the top of Forsaken Fortress 2, there's a door that you can only open if you have the Skull Hammer by hammering in a peg. But by doing this series of movements that we're doing right here, we can actually get up to the door without needing the Skull Hammer. Oh, okay. I'm not entirely sure why that happened. I'm gonna have to reset the game back to the back to the Forest Haven now. For some reason, Link can jump off in weird directions sometimes with item sliding, so that's a little unfortunate, but it's okay. We just super swim back over there pretty quickly. Okay, so like I was talking about, the door clip was a huge issue because it was this really inconsistent trick for a long while. It's thankfully much more consistent now. But it was inconsistent because we didn't really have a choice of how we wanted to do it. We pretty much just had to bypass getting the Skull Hammer, and then we had to sort of jump through the door at the top of Forsaken Fortress using a really stupid clip that required us to pause until we just so happened to clip through the door to get to the loading zone behind it. But thankfully, that's not an issue anymore. So when we go back up here, we will be seeing that. All right. The route that we're also taking up to get to the door here is convenient because it skips over the trigger that spawns Phantom Ganon, because trying to do the door clip would be really annoying if Phantom Ganon was trying to attack us constantly. All right, there we go. So using the leaf here, we can just get around to this edge of the staircase. All right. So this is the newer door clip method that's significantly more consistent than the old one. So this specific clip requires a very precise amount of speed for Link to sort of jump through the floor right here. And it also requires a very specific control stick angle at the beginning here. I don't trust that. Okay. Okay, so now I just kind of have to wait until hopefully at some point Link jumps through the door like that. Yeah, that trick is really finicky, but basically once Link hits a certain amount of speed, he ends up going below the floor for 1 frame, but because he has a lot of forward positive speed, he ends up jumping up through the collision of the door so that he can reach the loading zone. And that only works because, for some reason, the giant doors that you see at Forsaken Fortress are actually just extensions of the smaller door object that are placed like everywhere in the game. So there's actually a really small door underneath like the giant doors that you see, and Link is actually hitting that small door to jump off of. To enter up into the loading zone that's behind the bigger door. So if that smaller door didn't exist, then the trick wouldn't work, unfortunately. So it's very convenient that those smaller doors exist. So now Tetra's really enthralled by the hero's sword that's on Link's back. So we don't have the Master Sword yet. We will have it pretty soon, though, for a surprising reason. But I'll explain that when we get to it. Also, you may have noticed that Gonzo is not in this cutscene, so the girl on the right side of the screen here is just going to float away. Gonzo is another example of an actor not spawning in, or not being used by the game, if you don't activate the trigger for him, which is near the beginning of the game, right after you would normally get the telescope item, but because we skipped that, that's not a thing we did. And so now the ghost of Gonzo is talking to Tetra, and she's looking over at him, telling him what to do. He even makes sound, but he's just not there. And so, of course, because Gonzo picks up Errol, Errol's just gonna kind of, like, float away now. Bye-bye. And she's screeching. So yeah, being able to skip a good chunk of the first part of this game does allow for funny sequences like that. Okay, so after this cutscene ends, though, we're going to have to fight the Helmarok King. And you might be thinking that, well, how are we going to fight the Helmarok King? Because we don't have the Skull Hammer. You know, normally you need the Skull Hammer to defeat the Helmarok King. But thankfully, the loading zone for the exit of this fight is actually active right now. And so we're going to be clipping out of the arena for this fight and just going up to the loading zone without even fighting the Helmarok King. And because we item slide up this ramp so fast, we actually beat the Helmarok King to the top here. And we can use the Helmarok King to clip out of bounds into the floor. And then we can crawl under the crawl under the barrier that surrounds the arena. And then just roll around the edge, which thankfully has collision for some reason. So that is the Helmarok King fight that we didn't do. Okay, so if you saw Link right there, you'll notice that Link actually has the hero's tunic and the Master Sword and the hero's shield, despite the fact that we never got any of those items. And this is the sequence break, or this is the reason why we call the sequence break that we're doing early Master Sword, because it just so happens to give us the Master Sword. That is not like just a visual thing that happens during the cutscene. We do actually have the Master Sword and the Hero Shield in our inventory right now. We don't have the Hero's Clothes, though. Those are going to be taken away at the end of the cutscene, because I guess Link doesn't like them. But specifically, the reason that we get the Master Sword during this cutscene is because at the beginning of this cutscene, Link has to draw the Master Sword into his hand. And when the game does that during this cutscene, it actually hard codes the Master Sword into his inventory when he actually pulls it out. So that applies for a bunch of other cutscenes. Any cutscene where Link takes his sword out, his sword is hard-coded to a certain value. And then he gets to keep it after the cutscene. So it's actually really miraculous that the game does this for us, because otherwise we would not be able to get the light arrows when we went to Ganon's tower, since getting the light arrows requires us to fight Phantom Ganon. And as I mentioned earlier, Phantom Ganon can only be damaged with the Master Sword. The Hero's Sword has absolutely no effect on Phantom Ganon. So the game would still technically be completable if we didn't get the Master Sword here, but it would be significantly more difficult, and it would not even be close to RTA or Marathon viable if we did not get the Master Sword in this cutscene. So, thank you to the developers for hard-coding in the Master Sword value here, and for a lot of subsequent cutscenes that we'll be seeing. So here's this dragon that we never helped, but he's here to help us. This game does, even in its any % run, there are still a lot of cutscenes that we have to watch, despite the fact that we do skip a significant portion of them. I'm not exactly sure on what the ratio is, but I believe the ratio is somewhere... it's somewhere to the point that more than 50% of this run is cutscenes, or like loading times and stuff like that, which is kind of surprising for Wind Waker, even though it's only like an hour long. So the game would be significantly faster if we could skip all of these cutscenes, like with, you know, say like if the developers decided to program built-in cutscene skips or something. The developers actually did program in a cutscene skip for the beginning of the run. The intro cutscene that explains the backstory behind like the beginning of Wind Waker is actually skippable, and that's very nice because that cutscene is almost 4 minutes long, so it's nice that we at least have that one. Alright, and now we go down to Hyrule. And of course, because we never opened up the Tower of the Gods, it's not here in this cutscene. So this is the point at which the game would have crashed if I did not beat Forsaken Fortress 1, because the game expects the King of Red Lions to be active during this cutscene. So I'm sure that many of you have heard of a technique before known as barrier skip that I mentioned at the beginning of the run. And the barrier skip in question we are going to be performing in just under a minute right here after this cutscene's over. This is the biggest sequence break in the entire game, as it allows us to go from Hyrule Castle to the final dungeon of the game, which is Ganon's Tower. To get to the barrier, I'm first going to do this item slide clip through Hyrule Castle, which is a bit finicky, but should be okay. Yeah, there we go. All right. So the setup for barrier skip is very precise. To start with, I'm first going to have to pull out the Wind Waker on a specific frame here to cancel the knockback animation from the first part of the barrier, which we call the knockback barrier, just like this. All right, so now I'm going to be lining up the drop shadow of the R button here with a specific part of this pole. Okay, this should be good. And now, as long as my item sliding speed is within a specific range, I can just barely manage to clip through the barrier like that. Because the polygons that make up the barrier actually don't quite come together correctly. So there's a series of about, I think it's 0.008 of a degree of angles that work for being able to bypass that very tiny crack in the barrier. So it's about, I believe it's about 14 angles out of 65,536 total possible angles that you can have in this game that work for that. So now we're in the final dungeon of the game. We're almost done. We just got to go through Ganon's Tower. So to start with, because we never beat any of the temples, we can't do the trials. So instead, we're going to skip the trials with a technique known as a ledge clip, where I use a bomb and a ledge to push myself out of bounds, and so I can get to the loading zone here. All right. And then, of course, we can just... There are a lot of long stairways in this dungeon, so we can just item slide up all of them. I'm also going to need more magic, so I got that small drop right there. Thankfully, most of the magic drops in this game are predictable, which is very nice. This cutscene right here is supposed to be information that's used if you want to go back to the overworld from Ganon's Tower, but obviously we're not going to be doing that, so that cutscene doesn't tell us anything. And now, this is the Phantom Ganon maze. The solution to this maze is the exact same every time, so I don't have to worry about like being wrong or anything, as long as I just remember down, left, right, up. Normally, to figure out where you need to go next, you need to fight Phantom Ganon a bunch of times, and every time you defeat him, his sword hilt is going to drop in a specific direction, and wherever the hilt points is where Phantom Ganon is going to be. Alright, so this is the final iteration of the maze where we have to fight him to spawn in the light arrow chest. I'm also going to be intentionally taking damage here so that I can get better prepared for a skip that I'll be doing right before the end of the run. But now we have the light arrows. And a very convenient thing about the light arrows is that we actually get the entire set of elemental arrows once we obtain the light arrows here. So we also have the fire and ice arrows, which is pretty cool. That doesn't specifically help any percent, but for other categories, it's a very useful thing to see, and to be able to use those elemental arrows when you go back to the overworld. So now there's one final time that we have to fight Phantom Ganon here. And so in this iteration, we just shoot him with a light arrow, and he's dead. The specific RNG pattern that we got there, where he spawns all the way around you, the real Phantom Ganon is always the one that spawns directly behind you. So I was able to just turn around and shoot a light arrow as soon as I saw that RNG pattern. That's actually the RNG pattern that you want back in the room where I got the light arrows, because that's the one that's fastest to defeat if you only have your sword. Alright, so in this room I need to defeat all the enemies, but that's pretty trivial with the light arrows. These enemies, I can shoot 2 of them with a single light arrow if I line it up correctly, and the same thing can be applied here with these 2 dark nuts. And then 1 more quarter heart of damage as this cutscene happens. Because Link gets up during the cutscene, I don't have to worry about losing time to that. And so now we are in the Puppet Ganon room, and once again, because Link took his sword out during this cutscene, our sword got upgraded to the fully powered Master Sword, and Link also conveniently got the Mirror Shield. The shield doesn't really matter, and the sword doesn't really matter either. You can beat Ganondorf, the final boss, with, the hero's sword if you really want to, but the game just gives us the Master Sword, so it's convenient. Of course, the main reason, as I mentioned, for the Master Sword being given to us, at least in the speedrun, is so that we can defeat Phantom Ganon to get the light arrows. But first we have to go through this cutscene with Zelda, who happened to appear out of nowhere. Normally in the game, you go through a cutscene that's supposed to be sort of like a lore drop, where Tetra turns into Zelda. But because we obviously skipped that cutscene, that context was never given to us in the speedrun. So this fight that's coming up, called the Puppet Ganon fight, this is where gyro aiming is especially useful in the run. So the weak point for the Puppet Ganon fight is going to be the tail at the end that Puppet Ganon usually swings around randomly. So with the gyro, I'm going to attempt to aim to shoot that tail as fast as I can on each of the 3 individual phases of this fight. And I turned on the gyro right after I did the barrier skip, because the barrier skip is pretty much impossible to do with gyro aiming. like even like really small movements will mess up your angle enough so that you wouldn't be able to do it. All right, but here we go. Let's see if we can get to the first shot here. All right, that's 1. That's 2. And 3. All right. So yeah, that was a very good fight. I'm happy with that. It can sometimes be really tough to try to predict where Puppet Ganon's going to go. Because he does move around randomly, and his tail will sometimes swing to a random side of his that you can't really predict. And sometimes he can get so close to you that it's like not possible to shoot the tail from where you are. But moving around while aiming in first person does make that significantly easier. All right, time for the second spider phase. All right, so right here, I'm going to attempt to shoot the tail twice in a row. Ah, okay, I wasn't able to get it. That shot is also very precise. I'm not going to go for it again because I do hopefully... Oh, wow. Yeah, I did not get any magic there. That's an issue. We do rely on the Keese during this fight to drop us some magic. And if we don't get that, specifically if I don't get that here, that's going to be a bit of an issue. Okay, 1. All right, I'll be able to live with this. This means that I can only miss 1 shot in the third phase, though. Alright, so that's the end of the spider phase. So now we get to the Moldorm phase. And so depending on how he moves at the beginning here, I'll try to get a quick snipe off of him. Alright, nice. Alright, he's going to ram into the wall 3 times, and then he's going to come for me. I'm going to try to do a really precise shot here known as the Trog shot. Ah, okay, I was a little bit late, but you can hit him right after that with a good enough aim. And, all right, yep, he rammed into me, and we can just do the final shot now. So, yeah. That's definitely the hardest fight of the entire run. If you get both the tricky shot in the second and third phases, it goes by really quickly, and it's really cool. And now, all that there's left to do is fight the final boss, Ganondorf. But, normally, to get to the Ganondorf fight, you need the hookshot, which we don't currently have, since you need to hookshot onto the platform, which leads to the loading zone for the fight. So, how are we going to get up there without the hookshot, you may be wondering? Well, the Wind Waker actually has this very convenient glitch known as zombie hovering, which can be used to make Link gain height whenever he's dead with repetitive jump slashing that we're going to be doing. The trick that we're about to do is actually pretty infamous because the very first iteration of this trick with zombie hovering to get to the platform without the hookshot, it actually relied on using fairy RNG to heal Link as he hovered up to the platform. Because when you do a zombie hover, you cannot control what direction you're going. You're only allowed to go forward and up or down, so you're kind of locked into a direction there. And so you would have to just sort of, you know, rely on the fairies just by happen chance being able to heal you as they floated up into the heavens near the platform. But thankfully, there's actually a much more consistent way that we can do this trick now, which involves these 3 morphs, which I don't know why they're placed up here at the top of this room, but it's extremely convenient that they are. So, these little orange guys over here. Before I do what I'm going to do, though, I'm going to go down to a quarter heart, because the next bomb that I damage myself with will be the start of the trick. I'm also going to open up this warp pot just in case this fails. So these morphs, when you kill them with your sword, will drop a heart. But if we can get at just the right distance to them, we can kill them, like, without killing them. And then when we shake them off and they roll away, and then we kill them again, they will actually still drop that heart, even if we don't try to kill them with our sword, because the sword sets a flag at the beginning of, or the sword will set a value on the morph that stays until the morph is dead. And very conveniently, we can blow these morphs with the leaf, such that we can get them on top of the platform up there that we'd normally need the hookshot for. So, doing a little more morph bowling here. Okay, he didn't quite get up there. So, do this a few more times. Get up there. All right, excellent. So now the Morph is up here. Because the Morph tries to go towards Link, we can manipulate it to stand right on the edge if he wants to. Come on. Movement pattern's a bit finicky. Oh, okay. Well, he fell off, but that's okay. We can just blow him up there again. And, all right, he's up there again. Let's try this. I want to make sure he doesn't get stuck in the corner either. Okay, that's good enough. So now, because I hit him with my sword previously, I can instead kill him with the bow, and this is going to make him spawn a heart. Now I'm going to die and start my zombie hover with repetitive jump slashes. Ah, okay, that's unfortunate. This trick is really hard because it requires very precise B button mashing on the gamepad, so I'm unfortunately going to have to retry this trick again, but that's okay. This is why I opened up the warp pod at the top of the room. Alright, so let's try this again. Thankfully, getting up to the top of the room doesn't take very long. I am going to go back here, though, first, because it's much faster to get damaged right here with these mini-blins. Instead of using, like, bombs, because every time I damage myself with a bomb, I get knocked back. And I don't want to use hero mode for this again, because in hero mode, you actually, or the game will not be able to spawn hearts. So, spawning hearts is kind of important for the trick, so we will have to stay in normal mode for this. Alright, so again, the bow is a first-person item, so it can be used to item slide up to where we need to go. I feel that it's oddly appropriate that there's absolutely no music in these rooms at all. It's just all sound effects, because I feel like it definitely helps with, like, the tense atmosphere of the speedrun that typically happens around now, especially if you're on, like, world record pace at this point. Alright, so thankfully we actually pop out in a good position for doing this trick with the Morph. Alright, Morph actually went off in a really good direction that time. Alright, so, yeah, we want, the Morphs have, like, a roughly 180-degree range of angles that they can get, like, kicked off of Link. So that's why we face away from where we want the Morph to go, because the Morph will go behind Link in that situation. Is the Morph up there? Oh, no, he's not. Okay, the Morph is, like, in the wall. So get him out of the wall. Okay, there we go. Oh, okay, he's stuck in the corner, so I have to get him to shuffle out of there. Okay. I don't want to walk too fast, because then the Morph will try to follow me for too long. Okay, yeah, that should be alright, as long as I stand far enough away. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, okay, we didn't hit the Morph that time. No? Okay, maybe the Morph is not close enough to the edge right here. So, I might have to move him just a little bit more. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. So, there's actually a pretty good, like, range of positions the Morph can be, but there he was, like, he was just barely in that range where, like, it doesn't work, but also if you move him, he's going to fall off the edge. So, it's a bit unfortunate. Let's try this again, though. Come on. There you go. Okay. So yeah, as long as his spikes are, like, hanging out over the edge of the ledge, then that's good enough for being able to hit him. Okay. Alright, let's try this again. Ah, okay. Yeah, so I barely got pushed over to the left there after I unfortunately dropped some of my inputs. What's unfortunate about this is that if you're mashing too fast, you'll actually end up dropping inputs because the game will consider you to be holding down the B button instead of pressing it repeatedly. So if that hadn't happened, then we would have been alright, but it's okay. Okay, so we need to go back and get damaged again. There are also, like, certain things about, like, how I mash that require, like, me to keep very specific track of things. So like, I have to keep my thumbnails at like a very specific length for the mashing that I do. Otherwise, like, I can't do it as well, which is kind of strange to think about, but it's something that I always have to keep track of if I'm running this game. Also, like how I'm sitting can also like affect how good I feel like my mashing is on any specific day. So like a bunch of weird like feel-based things go into like how good my mashing might be on any specific day. All right. Wait for the morph to fall down. There's also a bit of RNG in like how far the morph goes on any individual leaf blow and how high. So like that last one was really bad because the morph didn't go forward at all. It basically just went up. And right there, it just basically went up again. Went really far to the left that time. Okay, he's right up against it, so after this next one, I can leaf over. Okay, that should be good enough. All right, attempt number 3. Come on. Wow, okay. Yeah, mashing just doesn't seem to be there today, which is unfortunate. I guess what just thinking about this like mentally, if I get high enough, I can probably pause the game again and then just do single finger mashing, which would be more consistent for me to do. So we'll try doing that next time. Yeah, usually I don't end up failing this trick this much because I can usually get it within 1 to 2 tries, but I don't know. Marathon pressure, I guess. Again, get damaged by our friends, the mini blins. Yeah, and like some days, like, you know, like I don't know why like my mashing's not working. Like I feel like I'm going like, you know, significantly slow enough so that I shouldn't be dropping inputs, but like, you know, something might be off in like the rhythm of my mashing or something, because we've seen like, you know, some pretty good height gains right there, but then they just end up dropping off, which likely means that I'm just not letting go of the B button enough for the game to count it as being let go of. There's also RNG in how far the morph travels when it rolls off of Link. Yeah, okay, we weren't able to get that. Let's try on this one. Thankfully, if we do end up like spending all 3 of these morphs, we can just reload the area to get more of them. Oh, okay. Did not expect him to go up there. That's okay. I can just travel around here. As long as I like walk sideways, we don't gain enough speed for the morph to actually be able to, or to trigger the morph trying to walk after us. Okay, that should work. All right, attempt number 4. Here we go. So if I get high enough this time, I'm gonna change to single finger. Yeah, I don't know. It's just not there today, which is unfortunate for this situation, of course. Because, yeah, normally, once you get that hover successfully, and you can make it up to the final platform, it usually takes about 5 minutes to complete the run after that point. So if I had gotten this first try, this would have been about a 105. Of course, we're getting into the overestimate range now, so that's unfortunate. But that's just kind of the nature of speedrunning this game. Because there are a lot of things that can make the run take a lot longer than it should. The Morph Hover being like the final example. It is good Morph Hover practice, though, so I guess that's something good that I get out of this. Ah, that angle's bad. I'm gonna get more magic from the pot over here, or at least I'm gonna try to. Come on. A little too far to the right. No? And, okay, there he goes. All right. Number 5. Okay. This angle's really weird. Yeah, okay, that time my single-handed mashing wasn't very good, so I didn't get very high to start the double thumb. What's unfortunate is that you can't pause in-game when you're zombie hovering. I have to pause with the home menu if I want to do this. So that's why I'm going to the home menu every single time to switch my mashing style. I suppose what I could try is I can try starting really far back. Or, well, no. The reason that we start farther forward is because we only have about 8 seconds where the heart actually stays spawned in. So if I start farther back for the zombie hover, I'm not going to be able to get to the heart in time. I probably could have done that angle, but prefer if the Morph went straight back. Alright. Oh, wow, okay. Aiming was bad with the leaf. One more. Okay, let's go straight back. The fact that the Morph fell there is actually really good. So now I can get it up to the platform pretty quickly. Not quite. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. Let's see if this is the magical attempt that my mashing decides to work with today. Yeah, unfortunately not. I'm trying to think if there's anything I could do to make this easier for myself, but I'm not sure. I did recently cut my fingernails a bit. I might have cut them too short. I don't know. Alright, I guess we're saving the game now. yeah, at least mentality-wise, like right now, I am feeling particularly frustrated because I don't understand why, like, my mashing isn't as good as it normally is. Like, that's probably one of the most frustrating things in speedrunning is when something's not working and you don't understand why, because then you don't know what you need to do to fix it, like this situation. Because, like, in most situations, like, if something goes wrong, I know why it's going wrong, and I can take steps to fix that. But with this, it's like, I'm not really sure what I need to do to fix it, because I don't feel like I'm doing anything different than I normally do. I am glad that, like, before the Morth Hover attempts started, that the run before this was actually pretty decent. The only, like, really big mistake was having to reset the game after I got to, or after I, like, ended up item sliding way out of Forsaken Fortress 2. Don't want to get too close. Okay, yeah, that was too close. And a shame, because that Morth went off in the correct direction. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we didn't get that. That's okay, though. Like I said, we can just kind of, like, reload the area by going in and out of the warp pot. And the Morths will spawn right back with us. So, yay. Oh, hello. No, my Morth. Dang it. Oh well. And I lost the other one. Oh, for all I know, it might have been more consistent to do the Fairy Hover in this situation. Because at least the Fairy Hover doesn't require me to mash within a specific speed range. I can kind of just mash really lazily and still get it. But of course, the Fairy Hover is like extremely RNG based, so it's not a good idea to go for that in any situation. Especially when you have the Morth Hover available to you. Oh, hello. This Morth has decided to follow me. Okay. Oop. No, turn around. Dang it. The troubles of leaping the Morth. That's a fairy. I do not want to collect that. That's one of the fairies that we would use for the Fairy Hover. Okay, I did not expect to do that. Alright, let's try this again. Magic also. That's not gonna work. That was too close. Alright, I guess we'll go with this. Or not, if I... Yeah, I jumped over the really small edge right there. This is one of those situations where absolutely nothing is going as planned. In the worst possible situation you can imagine. But I guess that's just kind of what life is for the most part, so... Up. Alright. I wanted to get a little more magic. Okay, the Morth is up there. Alright, attempt number, I don't know now, like 7 or something. Okay, let's see if... Maybe my mashing will magically work this time. Oh, still couldn't quite get up high enough. Or I couldn't get far enough to the right, because every time I did that, I keep on getting pushed too far to the left of the pillar. Also, the trick that I was mentioning earlier, more near like the middle of the run, where I mentioned the fact that we can skip the bombs. Skipping the bombs requires a zombie hover that is significantly more mashing intensive than the one that I'm doing right now, which is why it's not a good idea for the marathon, because, you know, if I'm having trouble doing this one in the marathon, there would have been absolutely no way to complete the run if I'd gone for the bomb skip one. Because the bomb skip one is essentially the same idea as the one we're doing now, except it requires us to use fall damage to damage ourselves instead of the bomb that we're using right now. And the way that you take fall damage is by dropping down to the lowest level of scaffolding that's on top of the puppet cannon room. So it requires very intense mashing for like 15 to 20 seconds or so. And then it also requires a frame-perfect bow shot on the Morph as you're falling down while you're dead above the platform, so that you can actually get the heart to appear, and then zombie hovering up over the edge to actually reach the heart. It's really insane, and I highly recommend everyone go check out the current world record that uses it, if you have the time to do so. I don't know, maybe you'll be able to finish that video before I get the Morph hover. But hopefully I won't delay the marathon too much longer. Up? Okay. That's kind of near the edge. Okay, good. At least the Morph is behaving a little bit better now. Alright. Oh. Again, mentally, I don't know what I'm doing wrong with the mashing. Logically, I can think about how I'm just not letting the B button come up enough, but I don't know how to specifically change my the muscle movements that I'm doing to account for that specific error. Because that's going to require me to, like, delay, like, only one of my thumbs while I'm mashing or something, which is very weird to try and do on the fly. All right. Yeah, zombie hovering as a trick, at least for me personally, it took me like a really long while to figure out how to do and how to like mash even relatively consistently at the speed that I normally do. So it's unfortunate that it's not being showcased today very well. But again, like I said, well, not like I said previously, but like sometimes in speedrunning you do just have bad days where like you can't get a feel for certain things if they're feel-based. Like mashing is very feel-based for me, and so like if I'm not feeling it, then unfortunately it just might not happen very well. Another trick that can happen with is the manual super swim, especially with the precise motions that requires. So like if you're not feeling the manual super swim, then it might not work that day either. Which is why this is, you know, a relatively risky marathon run to do. Just due to the fact that consistency just sometimes isn't there, like, on a differential daily basis. And of course it sucks that this trick takes, like, you know, 2 minutes to retry each time. Because of all the setup that you have to do for it. Okay, there we go. Finally. All right, that took us 24 minutes, which is significantly worse than I would have liked to have happened. But at least we made it happen. And I'm sure the marathon will survive, but obviously it's not the best to go overestimate. All right, Bo, so we still have to go through this final cutscene with Ganondorf right here. And this final fight is also pretty dangerous because I only come into this final fight with one heart, the heart that I just got to revive myself. So the unfortunate thing is that if I die to Ganondorf, I'm actually going to respawn down and have to do the Morph Hover again. So let's not do that for this run. And also, this is another example of a cutscene that, because Link draws his sword at the beginning of the cutscene, if we didn't have the fully powered Master Sword or the Mirror Shield before this cutscene, the game would just give it to us. So, how thoughtful of the game. Actually, now that I think about it, the fact that I only got 4 hours of sleep may have hindered my mashing ability. I don't know. I was too enthralled with ZFG's run yesterday to go to bed any earlier. So the final fight here, once it happens, is going to consist of 3 separate phases of the fight. Each time I have to do a specific amount of damage to Ganondorf, except for the final phase, where I just have to get Zelda to bounce a light arrow off of me, or off of the Mirror Shield specifically, to reflect off to Ganondorf before I can deal the final blow. Also, right here, the king actually isn't making contact with the Triforce. The camera just kind of makes it look like he is, which is kind of strange, but I guess the Triforce can grant wishes as long as you're within a certain proximity of it, instead of actually having to touch it. And then, of course, we have the Hueys here, that Ganondorf really likes to go with. So I guess the one good thing about, if it should so happen that I die during this fight, the good thing is that I won't have to watch this cutscene again when I come back up. So at least there's that side to looking at things. But it's okay. I don't think we're going to die. I'm going to be doing the really safe strategy for this fight, where I'm going to be using the grappling hook to get hearts from Zelda. Because if you use the grappling hook on Zelda, you actually get just 3 hearts right then and there. So that's very useful, especially in situations like this. Also, one other thing, Ganondorf's not the only thing that can actually do damage to you in this fight. If Zelda shoots a light arrow at Link that he doesn't reflect, the light arrow will actually damage Link also. So, like, I've had it in, like, you know, PB attempts where, like, I'll start the fight and then Zelda will just shoot me with a light arrow right away, which obviously we don't want to have happen. Thank you, Zelda. And then we can talk to Zelda again to make her shoot another light arrow. Okay. Oh, I'm surprised that was enough damage, but I guess that works. I thought I would have to do a little bit more damage. Okay, so this is the part where we don't want to get hit by Ganondorf. As long as we stay far enough away, we will not get hit, and parry with the correct timing. Yeah, we need Ganondorf to do this specific type of attack to get the parry to start on him, so that was pretty decent RNG. And so time is going to be coming up pretty quickly here, as soon as I insert the Master Sword into Ganondorf's cranium. And so the parry happens, and time. All right, so yeah, that was The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker HD Any Percent for the Wii U. If we discard the fact that it took me 25 minutes to get the Morph Hover, I'd say that would have been a pretty okay run for a marathon showing. So I'm happy with this run, despite the fact that it had that extremely obvious flaw, but again, sometimes we're just not at our best, which is unfortunate, because being at our best the entire time would be nice, but it's okay. Thank you guys for watching if you are, and thank you for suffering through 25 minutes of zombie hovering. But yeah, with that, I believe you guys have some tournament races coming up next, so thank you very much, and I will see you guys later. Have fun watching the rest of PACE.